Hey YouTube, Dawson Brighter here. Welcome to my review for King-ohger episode 38. Or is it 39? I don't know, I always forget at the last second, but it's in the late 30s. So this was the episode focusing on Rita's kingdom, as we have been touring all the kingdoms to liberate them. And it was an episode focused on an idol aesthetic, which, you know, could be tricky because the whole thing, like, that's obviously a very cultural thing, but the whole idol thing and just all the noise, like literal noise and it's just not my thing. It mostly annoys me. So I was not necessarily worried too much about it, but I was like, oh, there might be stuff in here that's not for me. And definitely the lion's share of the idol-related stuff, just in like its pure form, wasn't my thing. But everything else around the episode was pretty great, and I think they used it to great effect because they kind of use it to highlight Rita's character. I think one of their strengths is how they are simultaneously this serious and badass character, but have some of the greatest comedic bits, and there's this duality to them, and I think this storyline really brought that about. But the aesthetics of it weren't for me. The one thing I did like about it, though, is there was this one scene I wanted to mention before I forget it, where they brought in this character who I'm going to assume is some sort of known idol in Japan. I have no forking idea. But they just brought in a character that's an idol, and she immediately starts freaking out and talks to the monster and is like, oh my god, is that a tokusatsu suit? And she's like a Toku fan. And it was like almost a meta moment, breaking the fourth wall, which seemed kind of crazy, but I thought that was funny. And that was probably the only thing I enjoyed about the idol shtick outside of how it worked for Rita's story. As effectively what's funny is you have, like, one of the villains came in and he, like, turned all the prisoners effectively compliant and good. And it's kind of this interesting plan because he's like, well, now that they're good, they're basically really gullible and they can work for me. But then you have the other guy come in and is like, no, we're going to do American Idol, actually. You have Rita who's actually participating in it, and the other Rangers are trying to figure out why. And the core part of this episode, I think, was really great because it basically had all the Rangers trying to figure out why they think Rita is doing this. And, like, Jeremy first is like, oh, it's because your parents are dead and, like, you only connect to them through this. And he's like, my parents are alive. I visit them all the time. I don't know why, but their delivery in that scene just like had like a Sam Puckett energy. There was no Buttersock, but still the same. And then Rita found like this drawing that, or not Rita, Himeno found a drawing that Rita made when they were younger of like idol being an idol, and he's like, this is why you want to do it. And Rita's like, no, I'm undercover. This is why I'm doing this. Now, the thing I liked about, there was a couple things I liked about the storyline. In general, I think, again, it showcased Rita's character where they'll be really serious, and then they'll have this breaking moment of, like, being vulnerable or funny, and that was showcased a bunch in this. But also, I think that at least with some of the guesses, there was a kernel of truth to it, in terms of, like, their motivation of, like, I'm sure Rita always did kind of secretly still have that idol dream and stuff like that. I think their parents are still alive, though. I don't know. But the point is, I think there was a kernel of truth in each of them. Same thing with when Gira says, oh, it was because you felt abandoned because the kingdom didn't need you anymore. So I think there was a partial truth to each aspect, but I really do think that their main drive, or at least their main goal, was being undercover, which I just found funny because it was almost you know, this cliche setup of, like, the Rangers trying to figure out, like, this is the true meaning behind it. And then in a normal cliche Sentai show, they would all come together and be like, thank you for being there for me and discovering the true meaning behind this. And then Rita's like, no, I was just undercover and you ruined it. I thought that was so funny. Not to mention, I think it made the cast dynamic of this episode really great, because everyone was there with the exception of Yanma, who did go back to his kingdom to steal, like, this hard drive, which I thought was nice. I think it's nice to acknowledge that his is the only kingdom that hasn't been fixed, and they're still working towards it, and it also just made the episode feel a little bit different. I am a little disappointed in a way that, like, his was the only one that didn't get fixed. I mentioned that I liked that in his episode. I'm like, I like that it wasn't just, like, generic, like, everyone solved. We only left one unsolved. It maybe would have been nice to leave one a little bit up in the air, but still, I thought that was nice. But other than Yanma not being there, I really liked the cast interactions with Rita and just working together. It felt like a little bit of a taste of a classic Sentai dynamic. I'm not eager to go back to a classic Sentai formula, but the last 2 years, I sometimes do miss the cast dynamic of having a Sentai cast all together, because in both Dawn Brothers and King-ohger, you have a bit of a different status quo, so you don't always have most or all the cast working together on an episode in a very specific way, and I liked having that little taste of that aspect that I do like about having a more traditional Sentai team within this episode. And it just had some nice moments that kind of showcased something character-driven, learned a little bit more about Rita, but also just some fun bonding for the characters and fun, funny moments. It was interesting, though, that actually it was the villain of all people that had one of the most, like, close to home takes on why Rita does the things they do, which is why they cover their face, which is because they have to, like, not show weakness or not show themselves and put up basically a stone cold face to be the face of judgment and all that stuff, which I thought was interesting, and it led to the one thing that they found out by Rita going undercover, which is that he's also hiding something underneath him or something like that. And I always have this is definitely a repetitive element in my review, but I do just want to give props yet again to how awesome and visually beautiful the fights are. This one in particular had a couple just really beautiful images in the final fight with Rita. It was just really cool looking. Also, I didn't notice it this week. I noticed it a couple weeks ago actually, and I kept forgetting to mention it, but I like that we haven't had or forced a mecha battle in a little while. Like, it's just kind of nice. Not that I don't want to see them, but I love when Sentai doesn't have to do, like, the formula. I like, especially with how formulaic Toku can be and Sentai and Rider can be, especially thinking about Gotchard being like that. I like when Toku doesn't feel the need to take a box. Like, more often than not, you would always have a mecha battle in an episode. Like, I remember, like, a lot of times when there would be an episode where they wouldn't need a mecha battle, you would often open the episode with a mecha battle just so they could say they did it, even though they didn't need it for the rest of the episode. Anyway, I just think that's nice. It's kind of a nice change of pace, but I really like this episode overall. I mean, honestly, the only thing that wasn't clicking for me was just kind of the idle stuff, like in terms of the aesthetics, but I think its positioning in the story worked well for King-ohger's kind of brand of quirkiness and humor and stuff like that, and they used it to great effect, I think, for the story and character-driven nature of everything. It's probably maybe my second favorite episode of the bunch, just because Rita is my favorite character still. I just love their, like, duality of, like, literally can be one of the most badass characters in the show, but can be so funny, and I think is a kind of a complex character that's kind of almost hidden under a character that seems gimmicky, but yeah. I think that's why I like the episode second best. I think Kaguragi is my favorite of the bunch of the episodes, just because it was the episode that finally got me to understand him. But it looks like we're kind of leading towards the climax of this arc next episode, and this show just continues to be solid as hell. But what did you guys think of this week's episode? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps to ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Awesome Rider, signing out.